The right to vote in Canada is protected by Section 3 of the Charter. And under Section 3 of the Charter, every Canadian citizen has the right to vote in federal and provincial elections. But under the laws that are in place across Canada, you have to be over 18 to vote. So there are a number of people who are excluded from the voting process, people who are not citizens, people who are under 18. And that's who's excluded under the law. In practice, there are also other exclusions that come into place because you need proper identification to exercise your right to vote in many places. And for some people, that's something that's difficult. So students often have trouble proving their residence, which is something you need to do generally when you go to cast your ballot. Seniors who may live in senior residences, Aboriginal persons living on reserve can often have trouble proving their residence. So there's a number of people that may face difficulties and challenges in trying to vote. Vouching is a process that was put in place to help people who may lack the necessary identification to vote. And vouching allows you to go to cast your ballot with someone else with you who can attest to the fact that you are who you say you are and that you live where you say you live. So you live in the riding where you're trying to cast your ballot. And that can be helpful for people who may lack the appropriate identification to vote. There have been changes recently that have eliminated vouching, and that may pose a problem for people who don't have the identification and still want to cast their ballot. Electoral fraud might include things where candidates or parties take steps to try to mislead voters, and it can also take the form of voters who try to cast a ballot more than once, or cast a ballot in a place where they're not actually eligible to vote, or cast a ballot even though they're not eligible to vote. The issue of voter fraud, so voter impersonation, isn't something that's been a serious issue in Canada. There's no evidence that that's a major problem in our electoral system. Voting is a part of our core democratic rights. It's a way in which we can hold our government to account for their actions, but it's not the only way. And it's connected in many ways to a lot of the other important rights and freedoms that we have in Canada, including freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is what allows us to become informed about the political issues and allows us to cast a ballot in a way that's informed. Mobility rights are also important when we think about voting, because we want to be able to move around within Canada and still participate in the political process. So, and access to information about our government is also something that's important when we're preparing to cast our ballot and preparing to participate in the voting process. So there's a number of ways that we can hold our government to account and participate in our democracy, and voting is just one of those. The rules around who's allowed to vote and the practices that are in place when people go to vote can also have an impact on the political system and the outcomes of an election. So if there are groups of people, young people, seniors, the homeless, that are systematically excluded from the voting process, that will be reflected ultimately in the outcome of the election. The other thing that is significant is just the way in which our electoral system works. So we have a system that allows people to vote for a candidate in their riding, and you don't need a majority of voters in order to become the elected individual. You need more votes than anyone else, and so that system tends to arguably skew the representation in our houses of parliament or in our provincial legislatures in a way that's not necessarily representative of the popular vote. So the percentage of the population that may choose to vote for a particular party may ultimately not be reflected in the way in which the House looks because of our districting system. We haven't done much about that, like proportional representation.